line with the last poll, I kind of wanted to move on to cover the area, around focusing on what are the right KPIs that should be included in a dashboard. So Brian, I know you've been working on this for some time, but if you wouldn't mind, maybe just share some of your experiences in what's the process you used to define the KPIs, what were the KPIs in your company that were important, and how you ultimately went about, defining those, what data flows into those, and what are the measurements. So if you could maybe, Brian, just share a little bit, please.
Yeah, happy to, Kenneth. So, I think you touched upon this a little bit just a few minutes ago. And, I think it really starts obviously with the business goals, as you mentioned. But I think the other piece along with that is, where is your channel in line with that? What are you asking your channel to do? What are you asking your different partner types to do for your organization? What are you asking them to do today versus what are you going to be asking them to do a year from now, 2 years from now, after you set up some of these foundations? And so, having been at SentinelOne for 6 years, when our channel was, not quite as bad as 2 guys in a truck, but it was, it was pretty small, and we had to build it up from basically nothing. And so if we had set something like that up 6 years ago, our main KPI would have been something like, all right, I just need to know how much revenue you're bringing to the table. Can I count on you to do more than one transaction this year? Do you understand at least a little bit what we're trying to do? But today, you kind of move that all the way forward, and you're asking certain partners not just to be fulfillment partners, but you're asking them to be true lead generation engines. Some of them, you're asking them to go all the way up to being able to manage and support your solution, to be able to install it, to be able to add services that are certified by you and your teams, to be able to train other partners potentially on what they're doing. So it really just depends on what your partner ecosystem looks like today as kind of that first kind of entry point into the KPIs that you're trying to set up. Similarly, like for your distributors, what are you trying to do and what are you asking them to do? So as we're kind of layering all of that back in, it's, for instance, if you want to take a look at your bookings, you want to look at what's going on, not just overall at the top level, but what are you doing from an upsell, from a renewal perspective, from a managed service perspective versus a solution perspective. Also, if you're looking at partners who are doing, trying to do more and more trainings, you want to look at all the levels of certifications that you're doing. Not just the ones that are kind of necessarily baked into the foundations of your program, but if there are specializations that you have, you want to be able to understand, did you pick the right partners, and are they the right ones who are actually delivering after having been granted some of those specializations? Customer satisfaction rates, if they're going into being able to perform support on your behalf, or if they're doing other sorts of training or other services for you. Anyway, so at the long and the short of it is that you've got to have that kind of agreed upon way to measure that performance of that entire partner ecosystem. And you've got to be able to communicate that effectively to both your partners and your internal people as well. And not just the channel managers, but as you alluded to, it's the channel manager's boss, it's the sales teams that they're supporting, it's the executives who are taking a look and inspecting to make sure and ask the question, is my channel doing what I hoped it would do, what my channel chief told me they were going to do? Channel chief coming in and saying, yeah, this is exactly where I'm going, what do we need to do? Long and the short of it is, you got to create that common language, and it's something that's easily understood and it's easily communicated throughout the organization, because you could create this amazing KPI that you heard from some other vendor that you work with well in the space. But if your systems then aren't set up to be able to handle it, you've got to be able to pass on that KPI. So it's a little, you got to understand where you are as a business, where your channel is, where your evolution of the channel is, where your systems are. All those sorts of things are kind of interwoven before you actually select those KPIs themselves. And so like where we are today at SentinelOne, I alluded to a couple of that we really take a look at and we really focus on. And again, we're not looking at these across the board for all of our different partner types. So I love that poll that you had there, going from 4 to 7 or above. And I think if you were to ask SentinelOne, for instance, if we're looking at our overall partners ecosystem, we're probably looking at more than 7, but for each individual partner type, it's probably less than that because of the different overlays and the different things that we're asking those partners to do and the things that they're asking us to be able to do. Of course, you mentioned bookings. For us, that's not just TCV when we're looking at the overall value and the overall importance of SentinelOne to a partner's portfolio, but also annual recurring revenue. And we're a SaaS subscription service. So we need to understand how much is coming into the business every single year. And on top of that, be able to manage the growth of our business within our channel. And more importantly than that, we also need to take a look at the splits between renewals, which are kind of the lifeblood of the organization. And hopefully as a SaaS business, you have strong renewal rates, but the new and the upsell component of that as well, because often that's how you actually compensate your own people, your channel managers, your salespeople, your folks who are actually out on the ground working with the partners on a given opportunity. And so trying to demystify those things as much as possible so that everyone understands where each other's incentives lie is a really important way to kind of leverage that and build that KPI so that we can say, we did really well over here, but we didn't do so well over here. And this, when you talk to our people, you'll understand why they may not be as happy about this piece versus that piece. Of course, beyond bookings, then you talk about pipeline generation. And you want to take a look at pipeline contribution. How much is being contributed and created by partners versus that is created by our own people and kind of working hand in hand with partners to fulfill the transaction. And you do want to make sure that I think we've all worked in different organizations where your contribution rate could be, I've heard it anywhere between 25% and 50%. You just got to figure out where it is for your organization and that health that kind of calls out what a healthy channel looks like within your own organization. And of course, for that channel initiated pipeline, you want to understand your level of deal registrations, not just those that are submitted, but those that have been approved, the ones that have closed. What's your close rate look like? What does your time to close look like? These are all sorts of things you kind of look at in the background. Not that you're necessarily exposing all these things to every single partner, but as a channel manager, you need to understand that because it's the pipeline that leads to the bookings. Above and beyond that, kind of working backwards, you talk about certifications. I alluded to the fact that all the different scores of certifications that are in place. So if people understand your value proposition, if people understand how to pitch your solution, understand which customer problems your solution tries to solve, as well as getting deeper and deeper into the technical piece where not just running POCs on your behalf, but also being able to administer and manage the solution once it's actually been turned on after a sale. You need to be able to understand and see who those partners are and how they're doing. Is it one person that's done everything for the organization, which may be great, but if that person leaves, what happens to that relationship? So, those sorts of things you can kind of weave in and out. I alluded to other pieces where if you're talking about a managed offering, you want to take a look at your deployment or your consumption rates, how they're changing over time. A lot of our partners are moving into that more managed approach or that utility-based model, consumption-based model where you don't see some of those things like deal registrations. You don't see some of those leading indicators like you would for a traditional sale. So seeing how they've been tracking over time, seeing their engagement over time, and being able to build trends along with that is an important way to understand the health of that part of the business. Similarly, like looking at deflection rates, are they able to effectively support your solution? If not, is it an indictment on their team or is it an indictment on our team and our ability to actually train partners effectively? So you need to be able to track and understand that so you can provide the right solution and again, get ahead of it because you're asking these partners to be able to provide additional services on your behalf. It's effectively your brand that's being managed by these partners. And then kind of the last thing from a overall KPI perspective that I would look at is assessing your spend with those partners. And that could be anything from true MDF, it could be incentives like spiffs, like referrals, like rebates, and just understanding whether the impact that you're having there is actually a positive one, or do you need to kind of pivot some of your spend to this, that, or the other? Are you spending a lot of money on one particular partner for one particular type of thing, and then just not seeing anything else on the flip side? So just understanding all of that, because if you don't, when your CFO comes back to you and asks you to justify your spend in the next budgeting cycle, you could have some really hard conversations and really need to make some hard pivots and hard decisions that you may not want to make without that.
Okay, that's brilliant, Brian. A lot in there. I love the point you made about the common language. Yeah, that kind of understanding across both the partner side and your own side. It's a really important point. And Laura, anything you wanted to add to that in terms of the KPIs?
Yeah, I would echo everything Brian said. One thing I would add is when you're setting KPIs, I would just caution everyone to be very specific and think about how that KPI's performance will be interpreted. So as an example, at Broadcom, it's really important to Broadcom that we have happy customers that have adopted their software investments, because we believe if they are satisfied customers, they're using their products, they're taking it to full advantage, that they will actually purchase more and potentially expand the portfolio of products that they're using from Broadcom. And if you set a KPI for your partners around total attainment as an example, so with a moderate growth goal against their renewal business, you may have a partner who's met and exceeded their KPI, say they perform at 140% of their renewal business, but as you dig into that, in reality, they're really only performing, they're only retaining their renewal business at 60%, and the rest of that is all net new business, which is really not what we're trying to achieve by setting that KPI originally. So I would just say be very specific with your KPIs, make sure that they're smart and that they're actually driving what you are trying to drive as a company.